In this update, fall promises to bring big changes ahead as the El Nino continues to get stronger. So let's take a look at the setup going forward and start you off with the temperature anomalies and where we stand so far for summer, because we've got about 10 days left of meteorologically summer and it's been baking across the south, and I think that continues to remain well above average. You can see the temperature anomalies from now through August the 20th, a good 5-7 degrees above average pretty much all summer long for the deep south. But in the middle of the country, it's been kind of completely opposite. It's been somewhat pretty much comfortable conditions. Yes, you're hot right now, but overall for summer, it hasn't really been that bad at all. For on the precipitation front, you can see where all the rain, that predominantly all the systems have been, they've been basically originating from this northwest flow as the jet stream typically lifts further north in the summer months. And that's exactly what we're seeing. So the ridge of high pressure has been locked over the southern states, has all that sinking air, and pretty much almost next to impossible to wring out any well above average precipitation. So all the activity has been really across the east and mainly across Florida, mainly definitely across portions of the northeast. Those areas have been seeing a lot of rainfall and actually fairly comfortable summer. And I think that actually continues for them. But what we're finding is out in the tropics, things are finally starting to get active. So as, of course, we make that transition to the fall months, we're going into the peak of hurricane season. And just in the last 24 hours, it's been crazy out there across the Atlantic. We've had Emily form, we've had Gert, we've had Franklin, and now we've actually have potential tropical cyclone 9, which will be tropical storm Harold by the time we get into later on this afternoon. So yes, the tropics are definitely getting active, and yes, we have another little tropical wave coming off of Africa, could actually get named as well. So definitely the tropics are continuing to remain active. But between now and the end of August, here's the precipitation anomalies for the next 10 days as we kind of end and transfer going into meteorologically fall. Yeah, it continues the trend of well above average temperatures across a good part of the middle of the country, across the deep south especially. The only cooler anomalies in town are going to be across the Great Lakes, portions of the Ohio Valley, especially into the mid-Atlantic, and getting into the Northeast as well as into New England. Then, of course, we had Hillary come make landfall yesterday with all those record rains out there, but it continues to remain very active across the Eastern Pacific, and that's going to continue to pull these below average temperatures across the West. And I think that actually continues, at least for them, for the foreseeable future. So overall, the breakdown on the precipitation front for the next 15 days pretty much predominantly has that ridge of high pressure really not much going anywhere. It might lose its luster a little bit further north, but overall for the south, it's going to continue to remain locked in place and continue to remain on the overall drier side. So you'll have Harold probably coming ashore probably sometime tomorrow in San Padre down there in Brownsville. But you can see Franklin out here in the open waters. We'll have to watch this storm by the time we get to the end of the month, because yeah, some of these precipitation anomalies are hinting at above average across the New England. But I can make an argument that this actually might trend further off back to the west and get pulled closer to the US. So I'll definitely have to be watching this particular system. But out west, it's going to continue to remain on the wet side as these eastern Pacific storms continue to remain active, and it gets caught up in the jet stream, and this will pull some of the precipitation further north and continue to remain these areas across the western states on the above average precipitation front. So as we transfer into the first 2 weeks of September, we're not really seeing a transition as of yet. The trend is continue to stay hot and overall well above average for a good part of the south and the southeast, where they predominantly seeing all the warmer air for summer. And then further to the north, the jet stream still well north. The polar jet continues to remain active, The subtropical jet continues to remain not active in this time frame. So the pattern pretty much continues really through the middle of September. I don't really see any, like, say, big changes, at least until then. But once we go beyond that, once we transfer into actual fall, going into that third week of going into that third week of September, we're going to see the transition process of starting to see those cool downs start to, penetrate further south. I think finally we'll be getting rid of that ridge of high pressure, at least the hundreds down there in a good part of the south. I think those actually will be coming to an end, and we'll start to see these cold shots coming in from the north, actually penetrating that ridge of high, and then actually bringing somewhat on the cooler side of conditions will be a welcome relief for a good, a lot of these areas across the south and much of the southeast. Well, I do feel much of the northeast continues to remain kind of on the below average side. And I think that trend actually continues really through the first, the second half of September. So I think the first half will remain well above average. And then overall, the second half will remain on the cooler side. So overall, it should be still above average overall for September across the south, but you'll just end on the cooler side, as we get deeper into September. And what we'll find is, as the jet stream, as this El Nino continues to get stronger, remember, El Nino is not really a force in the summer months, but it is going to be a force as we get deeper into fall, and especially into the winter months. So that's when you fully feel the effects of what El Nino brings to the table. Remember, El Nino was first classified on June the 8th. So it didn't even get classified until an El Nino really as we headed towards the summer months. That's why most of these areas haven't really been feeling the effects of the El Nino. It's still been out there. It's still been prevalent. And I'll show you here in a minute, it actually is going to continue to actually strengthen and get stronger. So it definitely will have more of an impact. And what we're seeing is the transition from, into September, as the polar jet will continue to remain active. By then, the subtropical jet will slowly start to get that transition. So you'll start to see these above average rains get pulled further and further and further south. So by September, we'll have the middle of the country still remain on the active side, and then where you're seeing those above average temperatures overall for a good part of the south and much of the southeast will continue to remain on the drier side, overall, and will remain wet too across a good part of the East Coast, and especially up there in the Northeast and New England. And like I mentioned, we'll be having to watch these areas. This is one of those years I think the Northeast is favored for a tropical storm impact for this upcoming season. So I do feel this area is going to be a little bit more active going forward, and we'll have to watch these potential storms heading their way. But here's the El Nino. Here's where the temperature anomalies really play a force. Yeah, out here the Atlantic is on fire, and that's one of the reasons why things have rapidly turned around. All we needed to do is get rid of some of that Saharan dust, which we have, and you decrease just a little bit of that shear, and then boom, the ignition takes off, and we've got 3-4 named storms right away. And that's exactly what's happening. So I think it's going to continue to remain on the active side, of course, as we get deeper and towards that peak season of hurricane season. But there is the El Nino continuing to intensify. Look at all those deep reds in the equatorial Pacific here. And that is the El Nino really showing its cards. Look how the warm anomalies across California. And that was one of the reasons why Hillary was able to kind of hold together so strongly and still actually make landfall. In fact, the last night, it actually took a beeline towards Los Angeles, and that center actually went kind of right over Los Angeles, bringing some very heavy rain for them. But here's the El Nino, right? So we've seen the tick up. We got the classification in the El Nino once we had this lift around the end of May going into June. So this is when it was classified on June the 8th. But then the summer months, you see it's predominantly been kind of holding steady. It's not really a force into the summer months. But when now we're making kind of making that transition, right? I do feel we're starting that trend of another leg up in the El Nino. And as this gets stronger, this is going to be this right now on a weaker El Nino. It's more central based El Nino. But I feel like as this gets stronger, it's going to transfer into more of an east-based El Nino. So this is what the jet stream kind of typically looks like in an El Nino, but this is the winter months, not the fall months, when the winter months. So now this is your transition months. This is going to be your transition months transferring into an El Nino, where, yeah, by the time we head into winter, the subtropical jet's a lot more active and it puts it well south. It's definitely not there right now. And the polar jet becomes a lot less active. So we're in the process of making that transition in the fall months. So let me give you the step down process of what's going to happen. So I think as we transfer into October, we're still going to continue to remain on the cooler side across a good part of the Northeast, but the jet stream will start to lower a little bit. And as it lowers, it'll bring those cooler anomalies just a tad bit further south. But I do feel overall still the subtropical jet still going to be a little bit less active. It's going to be more active, but not as active as you would like it to see. But overall, I think a good part of the South and the Southeast, of course, much of the triple digits will be gone by then. But overall, we'll start to still have the effects of several degrees above average temperatures overall for a good part of the southern plains and a good part of the Southeast. And the cooler anomalies, at least average or somewhat a little bit below average, will continue to remain on the northern half of the U.S. And I think that continues into your October timeframe, but you can see the transition on the precipitation front, right? As the jet stream continues to lower, as it gets a little bit stronger, as it becomes more effective towards an El Nino, that pulls the above average precipitation further south. So that puts more into play now, Oklahoma, more into play into into Texas. And what we'll see too is the Eastern Pacific will continue to remain active, but instead heading out to sea or getting pulled up, and it actually is going to be recurving. We'll have these recurving storms probably transfer a lot of that precipitation back into Texas and back into Oklahoma and back into Arkansas and on this feed of precipitation. So that's typically what we'll probably see, as we get towards, the October timeframe. And, so then we'll look at as we go into November, as the jet streams continues to lower, as the El Nino will be starting to show its cards, and as we get closer to winter, we'll start to see more of the effects of the El Nino. So remember, central based, is it weaker, and then a stronger El Nino is more east based. So I do feel the cooler anomalies. Remember last year, November was somewhat on the cooler side, and I think that's actually what's going to happen again. So we'll have those below average anomalies start to really feel the effects after you had a brutal summer and after you had a warmer fall. But I think by the time we head into November, we'll have these predominantly overall cooler than average conditions across a good part of the eastern 2/3 of the US, as the West will start to warm up and we'll start to begin to feel the effects of that El Nino. And see, by November, you'll again continue to see the effects, right? You see the downward progression of the rain transferring from a less active polar jet, a more active subtropical jet. So it pulls the precipitation further and further south the deeper we get into fall and the deeper we head towards the winter months. So by the time we head into that December, right, the beginning stages of winter, we'll probably have more of an east-based El Nino versus a central-based, and that will pull, taking a more of a predominant look at an El Nino type look, and have that precipitation really elongated further south by then across a good part of the southern plains, across a good part of the southeast, and much of the east coast and much of the northeast as well. We'll see those wetter conditions in the beginning stages of winter. So I do feel like that's going to be taking shape, as we get, closer to the winter months. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video. Definitely hit the subscribe button and catch me next update where I protect you for and after the storm.